Okay, hello everyone. Good evening. Thank you for being with us this evening for our 2021-2022 application workshop. Thrilled to be here with you. And I'm also joined by Denny Nicholson, who is our Assistant Dean here in the Office of Admissions at Syracuse. The program this evening should last about 45 minutes. We're going to kick off with Denny walking us through the bulk of our material and then save lots of time for your questions. So couple of quick announcements first. If you have any questions that you brought with you or that pop up for you this evening, please feel free to pop those in the Q&A box that is on your screen. My colleague Mike and I will be reviewing the Q&A throughout, and if we can get a quick answer to you, we will, and we'll also be saving some questions to answer live at the end tonight as well. Another quick plug, we have lots of other wonderful virtual sessions that are available on our website. We'll be sharing that link with you shortly in the chat. And so if there is a school or college at Syracuse that you are particularly interested in, or a virtual class that you'd like to tune into, we definitely recommend checking those out and registering for any that interest you. And last but not least, I want to take the time to introduce Denny, and go ahead and take it away, Denny. Thank you.
Well, good evening, friends, and first and foremost, thanks, Kate, and also thanks to Mike. As Kate mentioned, both will be behind the scenes answering some questions while I'm presenting, so feel free to type those into the Q&A, and at the conclusion of my comments, which should last about 20 minutes or so, Kate will tee me up with some of the questions from the audience, and I will answer them to the full group. So we're delighted to have you with us here for the application workshop related to Syracuse University, and I have the privilege of serving as the Assistant Dean of Admission at Syracuse. I am the parent of 3 children. I have a college graduate, also our favorite, who is a current student at Syracuse University, and we also have a senior in high school. So much the same issues that and anxiety perhaps that all of you are going through as high school seniors as well as parents. So I'm here to hopefully provide some wisdom about both the process and maybe more specifically about Syracuse University's process for admission. So indulge me for a few moments while I walk through some slides to guide our conversation and learn more about applications and the process at Syracuse. So let's proceed. Go. First slide. So let's start with how you apply to Syracuse, some of the requirements, the deadlines, etc. So when applying to Syracuse, we only accept the one application these days, and that is the common application. We are a common app exclusive university. Most of you are probably aware of that. And in applying to Syracuse University, we have 2 options. We have early decision, which is a binding agreement, and we have regular decision. So let's talk a little bit about both of those and some of the benefits, perhaps, to each opportunity. So for early decision at Syracuse University, that is a binding agreement, as I mentioned. Binding under the conditions that if you are admitted to Syracuse University for your first choice school or college, and upon review of the financial aid award that you would receive when admitted to the university, if those 2 things are agreeable to you, we then expect you to enroll at Syracuse University, deposit at Syracuse University, and withdraw any other applications you might have on file at other institutions at that point. So that is the clear expectation of an early decision applicant. And there is, as part of that agreement, as part of the early decision program at Syracuse, there is an early decision agreement and form that you will navigate with the common application. Your school counselor must sign that form, as well as a parent's signature and the student's signature, of course. Some of the benefits of early decision, of course, you're going to find out if you've been admitted to Syracuse before the first of the year, if in fact you've applied early decision and you are not competing with nearly as many applicants in the pool. So at Syracuse, historically, we receive somewhere around 3,000 to 3,500 applications early decision. And the total volume of applications at Syracuse University will hover somewhere between 35 and 40,000 annually. So again, you're competing with a much smaller group in that particular pool. And we fill approximately a third of the class through the early decision process. We do leave 2/3 open for regular decision, and we do that intentionally, but we will fill a third of the class through early decision. So that's a major benefit. And the other benefit, obviously, is your process ends by mid-February when you're required to deposit at Syracuse. You know where you're going to college, and you don't have to worry about that and have that anxiety any longer, as many of your classmates who apply regular decision will go right up until the May 1st deadline that's affiliated with a regular decision. So leading right into regular decision, the application deadline is January 1st for regular, and Syracuse University will notify students beginning in the middle of March, and we usually conclude that process of notification by the 1st of April. So all of our candidates have generally heard from us by the 1st of April, and they have until May 1st to make their final college decision. That's the national candidate response date. It's the same date for every university throughout the nation, with the exception of students who've applied early decision. But all regular decision candidates at Syracuse and other universities have until May 1st to make the decision. Back to early decision for just a moment. For those of you who want to learn a little bit more, realizing you're up against our deadline, we do have some appointments available. You have all received, I believe, 4 emails now alerting you to this opportunity, and parents were included on these emails. Mike, perhaps you can share that in the chat as well for us. That would be great. I will be available the next 3 evenings. So this Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday evening, we're doing 15-minute appointments for any students and parents who would like to discuss early decision before making that making that important step to apply early decision. We'd be happy to answer any of your questions. So I'll be available along with several of our other most senior leaders within the Office of Admissions. So we look forward to answering any last minute questions you might have. When applying to Syracuse University, for some of you who've started the process, you really realize at Syracuse, we have 10 schools and colleges to choose from at the undergraduate level, and you are in fact required to pick one of those schools or colleges when you apply to Syracuse University. So it'll ask you on the application what school or college you are applying to at Syracuse University. So I'll provide an example for you. And that would be for a student, let's say you're interested in studying biology at Syracuse University. The first question, what school or college are you applying to at Syracuse University? The answer would be the College of Arts and Sciences, because that is where the biology major is located. It will then prompt you for the major of interest, and there will be a drop-down menu with all the majors listed within College of Arts and Sciences, and you would select biology. The next question on the application asks, what is your second choice school or college at Syracuse University? I strongly urge everyone in the audience to give that very serious consideration. And that would imply that if we are not comfortable as an admission staff admitting you into your first choice school or college, that we will then go to your second choice school or college listed on your application and give you consideration once again. So in this same example I provided, your College of Arts and Sciences first choice, biology major first choice, and your second choice because you're thinking about something in the health related field, or perhaps even going on to med school, and that's why you selected biology. So maybe a reasonable second choice in this example would be the Falk College of Sport and Human Dynamics with a major in public health. And again, just an example to get you thinking about the possibilities at Syracuse. You'll then be prompted with a third question, and that is, would you be interested in Syracuse University picking a school or college for you? I would encourage you to answer yes to that question as well. And that gives the University Office of Admission, our team, every opportunity to admit you to Syracuse University. So first choice, second choice, or Syracuse University pick. Why should you give yourself every opportunity? Because once you're enrolled at Syracuse, Many students move about from one school or college to another. And so, for example, you did enroll, or you do enroll as into the College of Arts and Sciences as a biology major. And after a year at Syracuse University, you have a change of heart, or perhaps you always had a desire to get into another school or college at Syracuse University. You're able to apply for intra-university transfer and to move about the university. There are no guarantees. I can speak from personal example. My daughter entered her Syracuse University experience in the College of Arts and Sciences as a chemistry major. And after taking an accounting course in her first year, she decided she fell in love with accounting and applied for intra-university transfer into the Whitman School of Management and was successfully admitted and is now double majoring in accounting and business analytics. So this is something that occurs regularly at Syracuse University. Important that you know all the opportunities to be admitted. I do understand at the same time that some students are very interested in a particular program. Perhaps you're applying to the architecture school and the architecture major, and that's all you want to do is be an architect. I understand if you choose not to pick a second choice school or college, or have Syracuse University pick another school or college, because that's not your desire. But for most of you out there, it is a strong recommendation. And then after you apply to Syracuse University, you will receive an email generally within a week from our office with instructions about setting up your MySlice portal. And that is where you will go as a student to check and see that all your documents are being received to complete your application at Syracuse University. So you'll be able to view that and determine if your counselor recommendation has arrived, or your recommendations, etc. So be aware of that. And it is really important that you take the necessary steps to set up your MySlice portal and keep close tabs on your application process and the documents that might be missing. Keep in mind, it does take several days for documents to be received and to be entered into the portal as received. So don't panic if you first go in there and notice that your letters of recommendation from the counselor have not arrived. But it is something you want to check regularly, perhaps once a week. And if several weeks go by and documents have not arrived, you can nudge your school counselor and your teachers just to make sure they've been sent. And the application checklist, of course, I've mentioned previously, the common application is the required application. We require your official high school transcript. We require a counselor evaluation. Your school counselor will write an evaluation for you as part of the Common App process. 2 academic letters of recommendation from 2 of your teachers. And then there are, in some instances, additional materials required at Syracuse University. Specific examples you can see here: the School of Architecture. Architecture students require a portfolio review. For those of you in the audience who are considering architecture as a major and you want to learn more about the portfolio review requirements, they are offering a session, I believe Tuesday evening, and perhaps Mike can also post that in the chat for our students and families to see. And I would recommend and encourage you to consider sitting in on that presentation. And then for the College of Visual and Performing Arts, there are often portfolios or addition requirements for those majors. In fact, they are required for almost all of the programs in the College of Visual and Performing Arts. So you can learn more about those specific details on their websites, their college websites. And most of you are probably familiar with that already, but just in case, be sure and take a look at the website, make sure you're fulfilling all your obligations in terms of portfolios and auditions. And lastly, and very important to all of our students in the audience, Syracuse is test optional once again. So for our seniors in the audience, it's really your choice. This past year, we went from receiving nearly 100% test scores for all of our applicants to the university, with the exception of some students in the College of Visual and Performing Arts or talent-based programs. We were test optional prior to last year. However, we went from close to 100% to less than 40% of our applicant pool this past year submitting test scores. So feel free and feel comfortable, frankly, if you choose not to send your SAT or ACT scores. I know that you will be reviewed thoroughly and we will take a close look at the many things that are going to be in your file, and I'll highlight some of those in just a few minutes. For those who are not aware, and maybe this helps you make decisions, this past year, our mean SAT score, and this is a super score, was 1320. That rose from 1280 the prior year. And that should be no surprise to our audience, imagining that most of the students who are submitting test scores these days tend to be very high scorers. And then on the ACT, we went from 27 mean score to 28 mean score this past year. So that may help influence your decision as to whether or not you decide to send scores. You can see on this particular slide, hopefully it's large enough for you. If not, I apologize. But this is from the National Association of College Admission Counseling Trend Survey back in 2018-19 about the level of importance of things that are in a college application. And you can see here, and it's fairly accurate for Syracuse University, and that's the reason I'm showing it, is the most important factors are typically the grades in all courses and the grades in your college prep courses and the strength of your curriculum. We are going to do an extensive review of your curriculum, what courses were available to you at your high school, and what courses did you elect to take from those offerings. And that's a really important aspect of our review process. Some might be wondering, well, how do you know what courses are offered at my high school? The answer to that is every high school submits what's called the school profile with an application. So when you apply to your however many schools, let's assume you apply to 5 colleges or universities, a school profile will accompany your application with all 5 of those application submissions. And so we receive that and we review those portfolios to help determine the strength of your curriculum and what courses did you take and what was available to you. But you can see the many factors here, right? What's important. Keep in mind this survey was 2018-19, so admission test scores perhaps played a more prominent role back then. Is a little bit higher up on the food chain here than it probably is these days. I would assume that's down considerably. So recommendations, your demonstrated interest, and what does that mean? Participation in events like this. We have record that you've participated. Perhaps you visited campus or met with one of our admission representatives when we visited your high school. Those are demonstrations of your interest in Syracuse. The Common App essay. So on the Common Application essay, I assume many of you have already started that process, but certainly not all of you in the audience. I believe there's still 7 opportunities on the Common App, 7 different essay options. You have to pick one. And I think that the one common thread with all of those questions is that there is some component or element of sharing a little bit more about yourself in those questions. So as you answer questions, it allows us to learn more about you and what are your passions and what are your desires moving forward in college and beyond, and some of your unique life experiences. So there's opportunity to write a little bit about yourself in all 7 of these prompts. Of course, you are only picking one of those prompts. But it's an opportunity to certainly reflect on who you are and your personality traits, your strengths, and really what are your passions up to this point, and what are your desires moving forward, perhaps. Many of those things can be incorporated in your essay. A strong note here to make sure you proofread your essay. Same would be true of the application itself. It is not wise to go up in your bedroom the day before applications are due and complete the application and write your essay and press send. That is not advisable from my experiences over the years. You set up your Common App account, you begin with some of the information, perhaps you fill in all the questions, answer all those questions, and then and maybe even chip away at the essay a little bit at first pass, and then take a break and go back to it several days later. And there may be 3 or 4 or 5 drafts, and maybe someone else takes a look at your essay and gives some feedback before you press send. And then at Syracuse, you are also going to be prompted with one additional question. on the Syracuse portion of the application. And you can see that question on the right, and it's very clear. Why are you interested in Syracuse University? And how do you see yourself contributing to a diverse, inclusive, accessible, and respectful campus? And my message here, as you can see on the bullet points, is to use clear and concise writing. And it's really important that you respond to all parts of the question. So be thoughtful in your response and be sure and respond to all aspects of the question. We get too many students who do not take this seriously and will put only a few sentences in as their response. It's a maximum of 250 words, but I would expect that you'll put more than 2 sentences if you're very interested in Syracuse University. So spend some time and do a great job of this. You will also, once again this year, have a chance on the common application to answer the question about any impact that COVID had on you personally. And this has been met by many students as an opportunity to say, maybe express that they struggled a little bit in the online or virtual environment. But I will say it was also utilized by many students in a very different way about the unique opportunities they had and took advantage of during the COVID year, such as starting online businesses. We saw that quite frequently. So the impacts of COVID, not always negative, but this is really certainly a chance for you as an applicant to share any information about the impacts COVID had on you. And do know that we understand that many of you had great plans for that spring when COVID came along, and whether it was going to be in the school play or you were planning to play a spring sport and then you were going to have a job in the summer, and those plans were canceled, right? And you had no control of that. And we understand that piece of it. And that's on us as admission staff to make fair and equitable decisions when we review applications. So we don't have false expectations of what you would have been involved with, certainly in what would have been that COVID year. And really, please understand it's not a requirement to complete this COVID question, but if you think there's more that we should know about you from the impacts of COVID, please do share. And then a little bit about academics in the campus community. We are test optional. You can see the question that you will be posed with on the common application. It basically asks whether or not you would like us to consider your test scores. Some students have already sent us their test scores. However, if you did that and you do not want us to consider those scores on the application as part of the application review process, when you apply to Syracuse, you simply say, no, I do not. I would not like my SAT or ACT scores to be considered. And then over on the right, some additional information. There really is no GPA minimum or SAT, ACT minimum at Syracuse, but you can get a sense as a high school student and as parents. Most of the high schools have Naviance or SCORE, where you can go in and look at scattergrams and get a sense for students from your particular high school that applied to Syracuse in recent years and the success rate, who was admitted, not by name, of course, but based upon GPA and other factors, those who were admitted and not admitted. So you'll have a general sense of the likelihood of or possibility of being admitted at Syracuse. And the average GPA for Syracuse admits, the mean GPA for entering first-year students typically hovers around a 3.7. And then I've already highlighted the SAT and ACT policy. We are a holistic review institution. You've all heard that from every admission representative. I'm not going to go into great detail there, as I'd like to wrap up my comments and open it up for Q&A in just a moment. So we do understand every high school is different, and we take that into context when we review your school profile. And the recommendations are very, very important for many of the students in our applicant pool. Perhaps they're more important for some than others in our applicant pool, but they do offer some extra insight to our staff about your accomplishments and sometimes your struggles in particular classes, and that helps us get a better sense of who you are. And then that over on the right, you can see the selection process. I mentioned earlier about 35,000 applications this past year. We received 39,900 plus applications, so just under 40,000. And we enroll a class of 3,600. Generally speaking, our admission rate tends to be around 45 to 55% of the applicants are admitted on a given year. And that depends upon annually the models that we're running, projecting yields. So we rely on those models to determine how many we have to admit on a given year. So that, and then lastly, in terms of your activities and community involvement, you can see the question on the application. Of course, we're really interested in learning about your activities in your high school and in your community. What kind of an impact did you have at your school? And perhaps what kind of an impact did you have within your community? So that's both activities as well as work experiences and volunteer experiences. They play a prominent role for many of the students applying to Syracuse, of course, more important for some in the applicant pool versus others, depending upon circumstances. And academic strength are factors there as well, but so certainly more important for some than they might be for others. And, you know, we like to learn about how you were involved, but also why you were involved and what sort of impact did these activities have. And lastly, and a clear statement from me and from our team, we're here to help you. And I want you to know that personally, I have a friend. My information is right on the admissions website. We have a little place where you can click on Meet the Team. Oops, Mike is indicating I lost my sound. Hopefully it's okay now, Mike. But this last slide, we're really interested in your activities and your involvement in high school, but also within your greater community. And he said you missed the one before, so sorry. So back to the holistic review process. Sorry, my sound went out. So we understand that every high school is different, and we manage that through the school profile that I alluded to earlier. We're interested in seeing what courses were available to you and how did you perform within that school. And we look at your grading scales. All the grading scales are different from school to school. The recommendation letters are really important to and perhaps more important for some of you in the applicant pool than they might be for others. They play a more prominent role for some. And that offers us some extra insight into your classroom accomplishments, and perhaps in some instances your struggles. As a recommender will sometimes indicate that perhaps you did overcome some struggles in the classroom. And that's often as important as the accomplishments. And then we also receive annually somewhere around 35,000 applications. This past year, it was 39,900 plus applications for first year admission at Syracuse. And we are expecting over 40,000 this year as we're running considerably ahead of last year. We typically admit somewhere between 45 and 55% of the students who apply to the university. Of course, not everyone we admit enrolls at Syracuse to get to that 3,600 number. And we rely on the many models and sophisticated models that we have in place to determine how many students we need to admit on a given year. But that is generally, as I mentioned, between 45 and 55%. And then this last slide here is related to your activities. And we're interested in learning more about what activities you're involved with within your high school, but also within your community, perhaps. And this is where you can showcase all the clubs and organizations, as well as your work experiences and volunteer experiences. So please share all of that. Really important to us as we review your applications. Ends up being a little bit more important for some students versus others, depending upon their academic background and how they perform in school. We're interested in why you selected the activities, not just the activities themselves, but why did you select them, and why were they important to you, and what kind of role did they play, and what sort of impact did you have on those clubs and organizations and activities work experience as well as volunteering. So please do share all of that information with us. And my last message to you is we are a friendly group. We're here to help. You will find our information, my information and our staff information. If you go to the admissions website, we have a Meet My Representative link. You can click on that. You'll see all of our smiling faces and contact information. So if you get off the call tonight and you have questions later tonight or in the weeks ahead, please, by all means, feel free to reach out to me. You can expect a prompt reply, and I'll get back to you with hopefully a quick answer. So I'll stop sharing my screen, and I'm going to turn it back over to Kate, who will tee me up with some questions.
Yes, thank you, Denny. We have lots of questions ready for you. So the first question I want to ask about is surrounding early decision. There were a couple questions that came in. First, how is merit aid taken into consideration with ED? Do students have the same consideration for merit with ED and RD?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. That's a common one received. And in its very simplest form, the answer is yes. Students at Syracuse University for early decision, and you've all heard stories, or many of you have heard stories that that's not the case at institutions. I can tell you at Syracuse, merit scholarships are the same in terms of opportunities through early decision as they are for regular decision, and the need-based portion of financial aid is exactly the same. We meet full need for students, provided they fill out the FAFSA form and the CSS profile form. So I want to make sure everyone heard that very clearly, that if you're applying for need-based aid, we require both the FAFSA form and the CSS profile, and they are due at the same time, same deadline as the ED deadline or the RD deadline. So that's a critical piece. Also worth mentioning, the merit scholarship has nothing to do with filling out CSS profiles and FAFSAs. That's a separate process that's based upon your strength academically.
Okay, thank you. Next question about early decision. We have a question here. There are 3 students from my school who are applying ED. Would it be possible for all of us to get in, or how does that work when there are multiple applicants from a high school?
Yeah, thanks, Kate. Also a common one that creates a lot of anxiety, right? That the thought or fear that we might cap a particular high school. And very frankly, the answer to that one is we do not cap by high school. So if all 3 from the school, assuming you are the 4th, the student asking the question, the hope would be that if all 4 of you are admissible, you will be admitted to Syracuse University. So I don't think that's simply not going, it shouldn't be a worry of yours. So hopefully I've addressed that one.
Great. Next up, 2 questions about dual enrollment. So could you specify how a student would select dual enrollment on the Common App, and perhaps just give a little more detail there?
Sure, Kate. I did not cover that because sometimes it gets people confused, but let's talk about it. So when you're on the academic portion of the Common Application, I mentioned it will ask you your first choice school, your second choice school, and if you'd like Syracuse University to pick a school or a college for you as a third option. But prior to those 3 questions, you are greeted with a question, are you applying for single enrollment or dual enrollment? So I gave the earlier example that a student was interested in bio. So let's go back to that example. You're interested in biology, and that's your only interest at this time. To me, that would be pretty obvious that you're applying single enrollment. You only have one academic interest, so you apply to the College of Arts and Sciences for biology. However, example 2. So the question appears single enrollment or dual enrollment. Would you like to apply single or dual? Now, in this example, you're not only interested in biology, but you'd like to pair that interest in biology with something in the Whitman School of Business, Whitman School of Management. And let's say for the sake of this example, you'd like to be an accounting major as well. So you can apply for dual enrollment, and whereby you then list the 2 schools and the 2 colleges. So the drop down will be dual enrollment. Please list your first school or college for the dual program, College of Arts and Sciences Biology. Please list your second school for the dual program, the Whitman School of Management for Accounting. And by virtue of doing that, you have applied for admission into both schools. And if admitted into both schools, if admitted to Syracuse and admitted into dual enrollment, you begin your studies at Syracuse, in essence, duly enrolled, pursuing majors in both schools or colleges. So I hope that helps discern some of the information about dual enrollment.
Thank you. Next couple questions about submitting, I guess I would say extra items with the application. So there's a question here about submitting a portfolio for Newhouse programs that don't require them. And then also someone asking about accepting, if we accept more than 2 letters of recommendation. So wondering if you could talk about kind of extra items with the application.
Sure, we do accept more than 2 letters of recommendation. It's not necessary. We have no expectation for that. And frankly, it's only a very small portion of our applicant pool who chooses to do so. But a student can do that. And you're welcome to do that. You could submit to our office email account, orange@syr.edu. Perhaps Mike or Kate can put that in the chat for our families, but the same would be true for any additional information. So sometimes students don't feel like the full list of activities was included on their common application and they'd like to send along a resume. Or as Kate alluded to, some of our Newhouse students would like to send a little video. All those things can be submitted to orange@syr.edu that you now see in the chat. So thanks to Kate for putting that in. And you're welcome to send along those documents.
Thank you. We also have a few questions asking about how scholarships are awarded and if test scores are looked at or how they're looked at in regards to scholarships.
Yeah, so we are not test blind. We are test optional. So if a student chooses to submit test scores, they are a factor. By test scores, I'm referring to SAT or ACTs. So by virtue of sending them to us and requesting that we do consider them in the process, then they are considered both for admission and for merit. The same would be true for students who said they will indicate they would not like their test scores considered, and being an optional school, they are not a factor in our merit scholarships or in admission. So we just, for those who wish to submit, and by all means they can, and they will play a role, and those who choose not to, they will not play a role. And we admit a very similar percentage of the test submitters, or we did last year anyhow, of those who submitted a test score and those who did not.
Great, thanks, Denny. Next question is about mid-year grades. So the question asks, do ED applicants have to send mid-year grades? But wondering if you could also answer that for regular decision too.
Yes, we expect mid-year grades from all of the applicants at Syracuse University.
Great. Okay, next question. If a student wants to transfer from one school in Syracuse to another, or what we call the intra-university transfer process, how does that work and what criteria is looked at?
So probably 10 different answers on that one, because it does differ from school college to school college. One of the common themes is that a student, when considering that transfer from one school to another, is required to sit through a presentation offered by the desired school that outlines the intra-university transfer process. So they do what used to be in person and now kind of hybrid, either in person or virtual, and it's mandatory that a student attends that. But I would also ask Mike, perhaps if you could pull our intra-university transfer requirements and put that link into the chat. I think it would be really helpful. Thank you, Mike, for doing that. And you'll see the differences in terms of requirements from applying one school or college to another. I wish I had one simple answer, but it does depend upon which school or college, and the details are in the link that Mike just put in the chat.
Great, thanks, Denny. Next question, does it benefit students to apply for a certain major instead of undecided to get into your first choice school within Syracuse?
Well, that's always a difficult one to answer. So I think the best way for me to answer that is I truly believe the student should be applying to Syracuse University based upon their interests academically, not necessarily how they think they might best be able to get into the university. Because the last thing we want to do is admit a student into the university, into a program that they really don't have an interest in pursuing, and then become frustrated, particularly if they're unsuccessful in an intra-university transfer process. With all that said, of course, there are standards in some of the programs. We have nationally ranked programs, some at the very highest level, and they're competitive. You know, the likes of the Architecture School and the Newhouse School of Communication, the Whitman School, and several others, the Sport Management and Sport Analytics programs. These are really competitive programs, as most of you know. And so, but you should be applying to the school or college and the academic program you have the most interest in. That's why we give you a second choice option or a Syracuse University pick option, so we can consider for those others as well. Also worth noting that of the 10 schools and colleges that you apply to, I believe 6 or 7 of them now have an undecided option within that school or college. So for example, you know you want to be in the Whitman School of Management, but you are completely undecided about a major within the Whitman School. You can apply Whitman undecided. That's an option for you. Most of our schools have that option. Also, some advice if you're completely undecided about an option at Syracuse, in my opinion, the safest bet is to apply for the College of Arts and Sciences or the Maxwell School undecided. And I say that because 2 reasons. They have every student at Syracuse University rather is required to take courses in the College of Arts and Sciences and the Maxwell School. And it's also our most diverse school or college with over 50 majors to choose from should you desire to make that particular school or college your home. There are a lot of opportunities academically.
Great, thanks, Denny. I have a couple of questions about early decision here. So the first is, if I do not get accepted early decision, does my application go back into the regular decision pool?
So there are a number of plausible outcomes to early decision that can result in the university, of course, denying you. And if you are denied early decision, you are denied to Syracuse University and you are not considered for the regular decision process. And certainly that's unfortunately the fate for some of our applicants. We then have others that are admitted early decision. And then we have yet a third group of students that are deferred to the regular pool. So we've read their applications and we've determined we're not quite comfortable at the moment. We'd like to compare you perhaps in the regular decision pool. And so we notify you that we are deferring your application to the regular pool, and you'll be notified in the mid-March timeframe. So those are all the plausible outcomes to an early decision application.
Thank you. As promised, second early decision question here. If a student applies early decision and receives SAT scores after the deadline or close to the deadline, how does that work? How can they still send their scores?
Yeah, you sure can. So be mindful of the dates in which I mentioned we notify. So we notify for early decision usually before we break for the holidays. So sometime around December 22nd, 23rd is a typical notification time frame for early decision. That said, if you have test scores come in early December and you'd like us to consider those, you do have time before we would go out with notification. So the answer to that is yes, you could. And for regular decision, if you have scores that are available and it's before March 1st, seeing as though we notify in mid-March, by all means, you'd need to reach out to us and let us know I have a new test score. I'd like you to consider it, and we could certainly make that work. I want to be mindful of time. I know we have a lot of questions here, Kate. I'm willing to extend given the number of questions. So maybe instead of 6:45, we'll extend another 5 to 10 minutes, depending upon the volume. I want to try and answer as many as we can here.
Great. All right. Well, next one I have teed up here is about GPAs. So how do we look at weighted versus unweighted GPAs? And if a student has both, how does that work?
Sure. Gosh, we could talk for hours on this one, so I'll try to be as brief as I possibly can. First and foremost, what we do in our process is we convert every GPA to a 4.0 scale, realizing some students are on 5.5 scales and 100-point scales and everything in between. So we do convert. We look for the highest GPA, whether that's weighted or unweighted. And if it is a combination, we will do some calculations behind the scenes to come up with an average that we think is reasonable for some students who have a combination of weighted, unweighted, although that is frankly pretty rare that that happens, but we do see some of that, and we will come up with what we believe is a reasonable calculation of an accurate GPA.
Excellent. Okay, we had a couple questions come in around our admission rate. So, for example, if 3,600 students are accepted for first-year applications out of 39,000, how is this 45%? So I think there's some confusion there about number admitted,
Yes.
Pending.
Yes. Okay. So, yep. Thanks. There's often confusion about that one. So we have nearly 40,000 applications. We enroll 3,600 students. We have to admit many, many more than 3,600 students to hit a 3,600 goal, right? And the reason is because most of you will be or already have applied to numerous institutions, and you can't say yes to all of them. So we have to put many, many more offers on the table than we expect to enroll because students say no to our offers of admission. So I hope that makes some sense as to, of the 40,000, we might admit 40 to 45 to 55% of the applicant pool. And let's just say for the sake of this conversation, it's 50%. That's 20,000 offers are on the table. And from that, we would expect 3,600 to enroll at Syracuse University. And that 20,000 that we admit would depend from year to year, how many we go out with based upon the models that I alluded to earlier. So hope that provides some clarity.
Great, thank you. And follow up to our earlier question about GPAs, weighted and unweighted, how would we look at an international student's GPA?
Yeah, so we have a full team in the international admission office that is well versed in calculations of GPAs from our international students, and those come in varying forms as well. Not always converted on the same scale. So it is a bit of a different process there. And I'd be happy to be more specific offline on that one if someone wants to, if the person asking the question would like to send me a direct email, I'll put you in touch with our international team. And Mike's putting some information in the chat as well. So thank you, Mike.
Great. Okay, question here. If students are not chosen for their first choice school or major, what then happens to their application? How do we consider them after that point?
So if not admitted to your first choice school or college, we then go back in and review the application once again for the second school or college choice. So we at Syracuse review by school and college. So we have teams that read for each school or college. So if you've applied to a particular school or college, that team reads your file. They're uncomfortable offering admission for that school or college. They look for the second choice. And if there is a second choice listed, they send that to the review team for the respective second choice. And so we go about it that way. And hopefully that clarifies some things. I don't know, Kate, and I want to back up to the early decision conversation we had earlier. I'm not sure I mentioned that early decision is binding under two conditions. I think I may have, but I just want to mention it one more time if I didn't. And that is it's under the condition that you are admitted into your first choice school or college, and that financially it's feasible for the family. So if you are not admitted in your first choice school or college, but you are offered your second choice, at that point, you are freed up. If you're in early decision, you are freed up to keep all of your other school and options available. All your other colleges options are available to you. And you'll have to make a choice with one of them by May 1st, including Syracuse, and hopefully you choose us.
Great. Thanks, Denny. And maybe this might be our last question. Are financial aid packages sent with acceptances? So maybe just a little bit more there about when a student would hear about that. And again, just a reminder to everyone that we did put the link in the chat to how you apply for financial aid.
Great. And I want to break that out for you as well, Kate. So there's merit scholarship, and then there's the financial aid award. So the merit scholarship notification, which is a separate process from applying for financial aid. So all students are considered for merit scholarships by virtue of applying to the university. We offer merit to about 1/3 of the admitted student population at Syracuse, and the notification of the merit award is in the body of your admission notification letter. In terms of the financial aid awards, if you've applied for financial aid and you have completed both the FAFSA form and the CSS profile, and you met the appropriate deadlines, you will receive a notification of the financial aid award generally within about 48 hours of receipt of your admission notification. So almost immediately after the admission notification. And so, Kate, it sounds like we may wrap things up here. I think it's worth mentioning, if you post a question to us in the Q&A, our staff will get back to you in the coming days. We have record of who posted the question, and then we will follow up with you if in case we did not get to every question this evening. So I once again want to thank both Kate and Mike, who take so many of their Sunday evenings to coordinate these events. They frankly do all the work. I just have to show up and speak a little bit, but they spend a lot of time putting these events together, and I'm so appreciative of both of them. I'd like to thank all of our students in the audience and our families for listening in. I hope you learned a few tidbits here about the application process at Syracuse University. Please know you have a friend at Syracuse, so reach out to me and utilize me. Happy to answer any questions moving forward. So enjoy the rest of your evening, and go Orange. Have a great night.